Hi, everyone, and welcome to our latest We Can workshop. It is so great to have you joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Carrie Ramsey, and I am the project manager for the We Can project, which is led by Queen's University and funded by FedDev Ontario through the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy Ecosystem Fund. And as I was just mentioning, as we were chatting before we hit record today, we've had about 70 of these virtual workshops. The diversity of the women's voices who have led these workshops have not only been inspiring, but I hope that they've just given you maybe just a little bit of direction. Sometimes it's just one aha moment that you get from a 90-minute workshop, and that's all it takes. So if that's where you're at today and you just need one aha moment that's going to take you to the next level, the next place, that's what we're looking for today. But I know Chantal, who is our presenter today, and I am quite convinced you're going to have more than one aha moment. She is absolute gold. And just before we get into that today, of course, today's workshop is being recorded. It will be uploaded to our We Can YouTube channel later on today. And I will make sure that as the workshop begins, we're also going to be, of course, we have enabled the live transcription. So if that is helpful to anyone, you can choose to use that as well. All right, you know that I usually do a land acknowledgement, but in fact, Chantal is going to do the land acknowledgement today as a part of the workshop. So Chantal, I'm going to give you the virtual microphone. I'll let you invite people because I know that you're going to ask them to introduce themselves should they feel comfortable doing that. I'm going to just hand it over to you. You're going to take it away today. Thanks so much, Chantal, for joining us. Once again, you have led one other workshop for us as well. It's so great to have you back. Welcome.
Thank you, Carrie. It's a pleasure to be here. I start all of my presentations with a land acknowledgement, so I'm going to do that now. I'd like to acknowledge that I live and work on traditional Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee territory. I'm grateful to share these lands with others, particularly the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people who are still living and thriving on these lands today. Making a land acknowledgement is really important to me for a couple of reasons. First, I have Métis heritage and self-identify as Métis. And second, I'm a big believer in inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. So if you're going to be all of those things, inclusive, accessible, you have a diverse workplace, and really, really have equity, it's important to acknowledge and thank those who took care of these lands for millennia and continue to take care of the lands we live on today. I'm Chantal Fraser. I'm a light-skinned woman with mostly dark brown hair, a few silver highlights, and I'm always wearing glasses. The rest changes without notice. I've spent 28 years thriving in the ultimate male-dominated career field, the military. When I became a veteran in 2012, I was a lieutenant colonel, which is fairly high up in there. So I was doing well. I had lots of great skills that were transferable to being an entrepreneur, but I will admit I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about what entrepreneurship meant before I became an entrepreneur. Over the last 9+ years, I've learned a lot, and I'm going to share with you things that I think will be important for you if and when you decide that you want to consider moving from being a career person to having a career as an entrepreneur. Now, what we're going to do over the next hour and a half is covered here on this slide. We're going to start off with some introductions, and we've got about 18 people here, which is perfect. I say about 18 because I'm here twice. What I'd like to do is spend just a short amount of time, about 10 minutes, doing welcome and introductions. And we can do that. We can do that in a couple ways. I'll talk about that on the next slide. But having a group of about 18 or 20 people is perfect for being able to do introductions when you've got an hour and a half. We're going to spend about 45 minutes going through the Strive model, explaining what it means, all that knowledge that I learned from the last 9+ years of being an entrepreneur that would have helped me if I'd known it before I started this journey. And then we're going to cover briefly the Ikigai model, which is a Japanese model about finding the perfect life, And I always love to share resources, give optional homework, and have time for discussion. In every session that I do, I end on time. And I know that a lot of speakers like to do the time thing so that they keep time at the end to do their questions. I prefer if we have discussions as we go through the session. So there's a couple of things going on. You may see me glancing to my right a couple of times. That's so I can see chat on my second laptop. But Carrie's also going to be watching the chat. So feel free to type questions into the chat. Feel free to type your comments when we ask for introductions into the chat, but we're also going to open the mic when it comes time to introductions. And I just want to once again welcome you here and say that one of the things I learned in the military was that time spent in recce was seldom wasted. Recce being a reconnaissance to figure out what all that you can about something before you go on to a next big adventure. So I consider all of you here to be spending time in recce learning about what life might be like as an entrepreneur and what sorts of things you'd want to consider. So thank you again for joining us, whether you're joining us live or watching the recording after the fact. Now we're going to start with introductions. If you're comfortable with giving a verbal introduction, you'll be given the opportunity to do so. If you'd rather do the introduction in the chat, that's okay too. We're going to spend a little bit of time looking at the chat. I do want to remind everybody that whatever you say is being recorded. We don't do editing after the fact, so please take that into consideration and be discreet if you're planning on making a change soon. What I've learned, though, is that most people spend a lot of time thinking about making that change from career to entrepreneur. So we'll just consider this as part of your recce. And if anybody asks, you can say I was doing a recce. You're welcome, as I said, to turn on your mic. And I will tell you that when you're doing verbal introductions, I'm going to limit you to about 30 seconds. I don't have a timer, but because we only want to spend about 10 minutes doing this, if I find that you're going on, I'm going to gently remind you that other people would like their turn. I'm going to ask you to stop. Okay, so what you can do is you can start typing in the chat. I'll give you an example. Some people prefer to go by nickname too. That's cool. My name's Chantal. My current work, I'm an entrepreneur. I help people find and or create their ideal jobs. And my dream job is doing what I'm doing now, but having a bigger impact by reaching more and more people. So we're going to go through this. I'm going to ask Carrie. Carrie, I know you're busy. You got lots of things to go, but I'm going to ask Carrie to go first, and then I'm going to ask Q to go second. And I like to tell you who's coming up next so that you have time to prepare. So Carrie, take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carrie, and I introduce myself as the project manager of the Weekend Project at Queen's. I also have a side hustle, which is the Power Her platform. And it's a business that amplifies the voices of women through a number of things, including my podcast, which is called Power Your Platform. I hope you'll check it out. Thanks, Chantal.
Thanks, Carrie. We're going to go to Q, and then we're going to go to Jennifer May Anderson.
Hi, I'm Sue Lethbridge, affectionately known as Q. I currently work at Queen's University and am working on changing up my business plan. I was originally looking at developing products, food products. I like to cook. And I have tapped into my love of sharing healthy living things. And so I've changed courses, and my dream job will be talking to people about how to live a healthy lifestyle and how to live longer than 50.
Thank you. That's fabulous. Jennifer, and then Stephanie.
I'm Jennifer May Anderson. I'm currently the executive director of a charitable hospice, and I'm here on recce. I'm just here to learn. So I don't think that I've formulated a dream job or business because I'm enjoying what I'm doing now, but I always like to, you know, learn things and see what things might be like.
Thank you, Jennifer. We're going to do Stephanie and then Helena. Stephanie?
Good morning. I'm coming to you from Kelowna, British Columbia. I'm on the Silks land with the Okanagan people here. I go to school currently at the university. I do run Indigenous Financial Freedom Circle, and I help people with their debt. And I don't believe that people should pay for that kind of service. should be offered to them and help them with a helping hand hub. So I'm just on the final part of that in regards to my broker, them approving it before I
Thank
put
you,
out a
Stephanie.
website and stuff. Thank you, Chantal.
Thank you, Stephanie. Right. So now we've got Helena and then Barbara.
Have you? Oh, I'm here. Hi, my name is Helena. I'm Brazilian. I just got my PR, and I'm a nurse. I'm working in long-term care, and I'm food care nurse. I would like to start my business as food care mobile clinic, and that's it. I'm in Kingston, yes.
Thank you, Helena.
Oh,
So we've
welcome.
got Barbara and then Jeanette. Barbara, okay, great. So Barbara's put her answer in the chat. I'm just going to read that. Thank you, Barbara. So now Barbara is a remote student with a dream job in data analysis. It's going to be Jeanette and then Vala.
Hi, I'm Jeanette Meinecker. I am a leisure travel consultant / manager at an agency in Belleville. My dream has always to own my own business, and potentially in the next 6 to 12 months that could come to fruition. So looking at all avenues that through this entrepreneurship to get further information on that.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Vala, over to you. And then next is going to be Elizabeth Cameron.
Hi there, I'm Vala Reed from Vala's Malas. I make gemstone and crystal meditation jewelry, and I also am a hairstylist. I'm just down to 2 days a week, and I would like to make that push into making Vala's Malas sustainable full-time and giving up the hair business.
Thank you. Okay, next we've got Elizabeth and then Susan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Cameron. I'm retired military as well, former colleague of Chantal's. I transitioned out of the military a couple of years ago. I'm currently teaching, which I'm really enjoying. I'm always curious about learning more about what's out there in terms of opportunities and entrepreneurship. So that's why I'm here. Really, I don't really have a plan yet for kind of what's next, but I'm always curious and exploring new ideas and new opportunities. And I love spending time with Chantal because she is amazing.
Thank you. Susan, and then I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, Denise. So Susan first. Susan, if you'd like to chat.
Oh, sure. I wasn't sure if you were looking at another Susan or not, since I hadn't actually put my name in. I'm Susan, also a colleague of Chantal's from years back and a retired military. I'm doing a recce as well, not sure where I'm headed next. I currently also work for Elections Canada as my local returning officer. So I have a very, very part-time job until it's a really crazy job. So I'm looking to see what will be the interim in between those crazy periods. And there's something out there. I'm just not sure what it is yet. Thanks.
Thank you. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Oh, good. You know who you are, Denise. And then after that, whoever Zoom user is.
Good morning. My name is Denise Rees. My current job, it's mom. I recently graduated from business and I'm working for my husband's construction company. My future dream job, it will be a job that allows me to be more time and spend more time with my 3 boys. It's something I really enjoyed. In the workforce, I have noticed that it's very hard to be a mom, especially when they're smaller. And that's why I am here. I am trying to grow my husband's business and take over it.
I love that. World domination. Great. Okay. Zoom user. Yes.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Iram, and I graduated in medical laboratory sciences as an assistant, laboratory assistant in 2020. And I'm here to learn more, to get more inspiration for you guys. And I'm thinking to start my business in my food business, like a truck or maybe wherever I get a spot. So I'm here just to learn from you, from your experiences. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Christine has already put her stuff in the chat, so I'm just going to glance at what Christine wrote, and then, oh my goodness, I hope I get close to pronouncing this correctly, and please correct me when you come on after. Uchema, sorry, I'm probably mangled that. Oh, yeah. Thanks for the introduction, Christine, and please tell me how to pronounce your name, wonderful person whose name I just mangled.
My name is Uchoma. You pronounced it really well. But you can call me Uche for short. I'm an internationally trained optometrist and currently studying healthcare administration at St. Lawrence College. I joined this Zoom meeting. I registered for this meeting to learn more. I'm someone who is open to opportunities, entrepreneurship, innovation, and creativity. And I'm not sure what I really want to get from here, but I just want to listen to other entrepreneurs and we share ideas and learn from each other. That's basically why I'm here.
Fantastic. Well, thank you everybody for sharing. And for those who shared on chat too, it's really appreciated. It helps me help you to know a little bit about who you are. So I really appreciate you all spending the time doing those introductions. And we've got a great cross-section of people here today from many different stages in their careers, from new graduates who are still learning to people who are considering a second or third option, which might involve entrepreneurship. So I'm really glad that you're all here doing Recce's with me today. And I'm very pleased that we're right on time because my phone says it's 10:15, which means it's really 10:17. So we're right where I wanted to be when we finished introductions. So thank you all very much. Now, you all come from different backgrounds, and some of you may be considering things like starting a side hustle or growing your side hustle to a full-time business, starting a new business, buying a business, or investing in a franchise. These are all different options that are out there for entrepreneurship. The one thing that I want to warn everybody of is that sometimes people have this tendency to think that the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, that life as an entrepreneur will be easy, that, okay, you know, say like one of our participants, you're the mom of young children, you might think, wow, if I have my own business, then I might have lots of time for my kids, and you might, but there's sort of trade-offs in between, right? So just be cautious that everything takes effort, everything takes time, everything takes planning. So please, I ask you to pay attention to what we're talking about today, what everybody shares, and think about it before jumping into an entrepreneurship. Now, are there opportunities? Yes, there's gazillion opportunities out there. You'd be surprised at the things people can make a living doing. I know of one individual who makes a living painting minifigures for people who play Dungeons and Dragons and other things. That's their full-time ideal dream job, is painting minifigures for other people, and they earn a decent living doing it. So you can make a living doing almost anything you can dream of, but there's a lot of things to consider as you go through this. So what we're going to do is, over the next 45 minutes or so, is we're going to talk about the Strive model. This captures all of the information I learned and a bunch of stuff I wish I would have thought about in 2012 when I first became an entrepreneur. When I chose to become a veteran in 2012, I had this idea of a dream job where I'd get to go for a walk and I'd get to do some work while my kids were in school, and then I'd be done when they got home and life would be good. I didn't really know much about entrepreneurship, even though I had family members who were entrepreneurs. And my business model, my dream in the fall of 2012 was that I was going to speak, I was going to train, and I'd write if I had to. And somehow by doing those three things, I would have a greater impact on the world to make the world better so that people could learn how to help themselves, their communities, and organizations thrive. That's huge. and very confusing. And for the first several years, nobody knew what I did, and that's okay. Over the last 9 years, what I've learned is that you really need to think about some things before jumping into entrepreneurship. And there are things that you might want to look at again and again as you play with entrepreneurship. Now, what I've put on the screen here is the best way I could find to capture it visually, because I'm not a visual person, is there's a group of 7 hexagons. The one in the middle says strive, because it's the strive model that we're looking at. And then if we start at the top, it says skills and knowledge, and then we work our way around the clockwise through time, risk and mitigation, ideal clients, value proposition, and expectations. And if you're visually able to see it, there's light blue arrows kind of going from each all the way around the circles. You can start anywhere in the circle and spend time thinking about whatever you want to spend time thinking about first. But for the purposes of making it easy to remember, we'll start with the S in strive and we'll work our way around to the end. But it's an iterative process, which is why it's captured in this model with the hexagons. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about is skills and knowledge. And the reality is that you have marketable skills and knowledge, whether you've gained them from your career, your education, your hobbies, anything that you've done in your life has given you skills and knowledge. Now, which of those skills and knowledge are marketable is the key, because you need something you can sell in order to have a business. So areas that you can look at, you can explore to figure out, do I have marketable skills and knowledge that I want to share with the world? You can look at the qualifications and experience and awards that you've earned over your lifetime. I know that at least one of our participants is a gifted sewer, and she makes beautiful quilts. She also knits beautiful things. Now, I'm not saying that that's what she might want to do as an entrepreneur, but she's learned skills by putting together these beautiful quilts that could help her run a business should she choose to become an entrepreneur, right? So there's all kinds of things that you've learned. And please, when you're thinking about your marketable skills and knowledge, don't think that you have to go back to school to be an entrepreneur. You've got what it takes already. It's just a matter of figuring out which of those skills and knowledges are going to be marketable. So you can look again with what you've learned, what you know you've learned. If you're working for somebody else, you've likely had assessments or evaluations. You may have won awards from your employer or from your professional associations if you belong to one. And all of those assessments and evaluations and any awards you may have won give clues to what it is you do, your skills and knowledge that others find valuable. When they compliment you on something, and that could be from your family members, it could be from your friends, it could be from people you meet in the workplace just once, and they could thank you for some service that you've done to them, that are done for them. Anything that you've done that people thank you for, potentially marketable skills and knowledge. And of course, there's a bunch of entrepreneurial quizzes that are out there. There's something I want to talk about while we're on this marketable skills and knowledge bit, and there is more to come on this slide. Anybody who's doing print screen to grab slides is welcome to do so, but wait until I do the pro tip so you're not wasting and doing extra print screens. There's a pro tip at the bottom of each slide. Okay, the thing is, with all these marketable skills and knowledge, things that you find easy that other people find extremely difficult are a really great source of ideas for what you can sell as a service or as a good when you start your own business. One of the women I coach worked for over 20 years in a municipal organization, and she was an administrative assistant. As an administrative assistant, she was always organizing travel and taking minutes and setting up meetings and organizing people's lives for them, right down to organizing some supervisors' dinner parties, right? She started a side hustle as she got near the end of that career and said, maybe I'll be an assistant to people, an administrative assistant to small businesses in my community. And she chose to do that. And I came into her life as a coach as she was getting ready to make that transition from full-time paid career with a side hustle to retiree with a small pension and a full-time business. Within a year, she'd grown things that she found easy into critical services as a virtual assistant for some of us who find things difficult. Like she helped me order some of my office supplies because after she got her business up and started, I hired her to be one of my virtual assistants. But she's things that she finds easy, I'm happy to pay her to do on an hourly rate. And she said, well, how much can I do for every month, Chantal? I said, when you get to this point, let me know and I'll let you know if I want you to keep going. So, like there's things you know how to do now that are marketable. You just have to figure out which ones you want to do, right? And there is support available. Now there's coaches you can pay to help you, right? There's also coaches that are available through many organizations. And when we get to the resources later in the section, I'm going to talk to you about some of the people that are available as free coaches to you. Somebody else pays them and you get the services. And I always support going free first, because then you get an idea of what kind of coach you like to work with, and you can pick up some of the basics of what you want to learn before you pay somebody. Lots of great coaches out there that you can pay, me included. I'm not asking you to pay me. Carrie's got a side hustle where she's basically a marketing coach, helping people tell their stories. There's other coaches that are here today too. There's all kinds of coaches that are out there, and I recommend that yes, you indeed work with paid coaches when you find the right coach for you for a specific topic. But know that there's free ones, and I'm going to tell you more about them later. There's also the capability of outsourcing and delegating. We have a participant here today who's helping her husband with his construction company, right? So basically, her spouse has delegated some of his business to her, and she's doing it to help run the business, right? So presumably you're getting paid for that. But also you can delegate by hiring employees to be part of your team, or getting family members who are willing to help out while you're in startup, or friends, not. Although there's cautions about doing business with family and friends, make sure you really know what's expected. Or you can outsource services. Like I have 2 virtual assistants because there's things I can do, but that take me a long time and I'd much rather pay somebody else to do them. Or there's things that I don't like to do and there's things that I can't do. So I outsource those and pay other people to do it for me. All right. So when you're thinking about what kind of business do you want to start, think about, okay, pro tip, focus on what you're good at and what you love doing, and the other stuff that's necessary for your business, then make sure that you find the right people to help you do those things. Now I'm going to pause here for a moment and see if there's any questions on figuring out the skills and knowledge that are marketable before I carry on. I'm going to take a sip of tea. And I don't see anything popping up in the chat, so I'm going to move on to the next idea. Time. Now, with time, there's a lot of things to consider. There's only 24 hours in a day for everybody. And I know that when you have a career, or when you're a student, or when you're trying to juggle being employed and looking after young children, and trying to achieve your dreams, that you always feel like there's not enough time in the day. We all only get 24 hours in a day. So when you're thinking about being an entrepreneur, you're not going to get extra hours to be an entrepreneur. You're still going to only have those 24 hours. So it's good to think about which of those hours doing something else are you going to give up to be devoted towards your entrepreneurial goals. It's also good to think about, is this business going to be something you do full-time or part-time? Like I said earlier, when I started out, I think I said it earlier, I planned to spend more time with my kids. My kids were all going to be in school full-time, which meant that they'd get on the bus at a certain time in the morning and they'd get off at the end of the day. So that gave me effectively 6 hours a day that I could devote to my business. Okay, so some would say that's part-time, some would say it's full-time. It depends what your definition is and how much you want to put into it. You can also think about time as, are you willing to be on a flexible schedule? When you start your own business, and often as you grow a business, you can find yourself saying, okay, Chantal, I'm going to work from 8 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon, and that's it. Well, sometimes you end up working in the evenings and weekends if you have deadlines for your clients and you weren't able to get it done in that time. So it's good to consider, yes, having a schedule, but also having some flexibility in your schedule, because it's important to factor in the learning curve. It's going to take you time to learn how to do the bits that you didn't know how to do. One of the things that I had to learn how to do when I started my own business is when you're in the military, you've got a whole information technology department. And they handle things like if your phone stops working or if your laptop has a bug. I decided that I didn't want to learn everything I needed to learn to run my own laptops. So I chose to buy my laptops from a local independent computer store so that they would make sure that everything was loaded properly. And if I had any problems with my laptop, I had a number that I could call and I could ask them for advice over the phone or drop my laptop off and they would fix it up. So think about that learning curve and how much time you want to spend learning and how much you want to go back to the last slide and outsource or delegate. And then think about whether you're going to invest time or money. My first webpage that I started, I chose to invest my time in learning how to do a very basic website. My website is still really basic and it's probably going to get upgraded this year. But at the time, I had time and I had my money. I had the privilege of starting a business while I was a veteran and had a pension, but that pension had purposes that it was going towards in our family expenses, right? So I didn't want to spend too much money. So I spent the time to learn how to create a very basic website and put some information on it. And it's changed and it looks a little bit better now than it did 9 years ago, but it's still, consider, do you want to invest the time and money, time or money, and figure out what makes sense to you. So the pro tip here is everything takes longer than you expect it to. Everything. And it doesn't matter what you're thinking about doing. Even creating invoices takes time. You can get softwares that can help you out with that, but it still takes time to put in invoices and you have to factor in all that sort of stuff. So just consider the time you want to put into your business and consider what offsets you could have to help you with that. Now, feel free to put questions into the chat as you go. If you have any questions now, you're welcome to turn on your mic and ask them or pop them into the chat. I'll take another sip of tea to give you a chance to ask a question.
Chantal, I'll just throw a question out there in terms of, because I see it says invest time and or money. Sometimes people don't really have a good idea of how much money it will take them to get the business started. I don't know if you have any thoughts in that area, because I think some people think, oh, I'll need a full year's salary to live on. And some people don't think they'll need any money at all. So where's kind of the midpoint there?
That's a great question, Carrie. And I talk a little bit about that in the next slide, but not specifically to that point. So I'm going to answer your question now, and then we may explore it a little bit further in the next slide. So as I said just a moment ago, I had the privilege of having a pension when I decided to start my own business, and my husband had a successful business. We owned our own home, and the mortgage payments were reasonable under what my pension was going to be and all that stuff, right? So that's a privilege. Many people who've had a successful career have the privilege of having a pension that helps them start off, and so that they know that they don't need to rely on the business to get going. But there's many others who might be earlier in their career or just considering, do I want a career working for somebody else, or do I want to work for myself and reap the rewards working for myself? In which case, it's good to have a backup plan. And the backup plan could be that you work part-time for somebody else just to make sure that the cash flow is happening so that you have money. Now, how much money does it take to start a business? You can start a business for nothing, or you can start a business for $100,000 or $2 million. It depends on the business. So that's a good segue into risk and mitigation strategies. because there's all kinds of risks, and financial is one of the big ones when you're starting a business. So one of the things to consider when you're looking at the potential risks, okay, you can't stop risks. There's always going to be risks. What you can do is that you can be prepared for risks. So you can think about what your financial security is and how much you have in savings or pension or investment that you're willing to put up to help you start the business. And you can think about how much do you really need to live on. So maybe you could downsize your expenses at home. When I became a veteran and I could put my own kids on the bus in the morning and be there most days when they got off the bus, I stopped paying childcare, which was really nice because I had been paying for before and after childcare, and my youngest was just starting kindergarten starting grade 1, so full-time school, which meant that the alternate days that he was off and I was paying for daycare, I didn't have to pay anymore. So that was one of the things I thought about, was the financial risks when I started my business. But you have to think about what you need to live on and what you need, like what you really need. You need to have a safe place to live. You need to have access to basic living amenities, like water and heat and food. So the very basics, what do you need? And then what does that allow you? What are you comfortable with when you're going to look at how much money you need for everything else and how much you have available for starting your business? Another risk is disappointment. You can have a dream and it might not work out. Well, your first business idea might not work. That's fine. Maybe your next business idea will work, or maybe your third business idea will work, or maybe your 15th business idea will work. You may suffer disappointment, but you'll learn every time things don't work out as you expect. And from those lessons learned, you can figure out what you want to do next. So those are some of the risks. And some of the women that I know who started their own businesses have gone back to work either part-time or full-time in order to pay for the basic necessities, and then put their businesses more to the side hustle until they were ready and they had the financial wherewithal to carry on. Now, there's a bunch of different things you can do to help stop, especially the financial risk, is you can do a lean startup. And there's whole books. There's literally a book called Lean Startup, which I didn't put in the resources. Anyway, the book on lean startup and the whole lean startup movement means that you start with very basic minimum offering that people are willing to pay for. So it could be, say you're going to make, we've got a food truck person here, right? So you're going to go out with your food truck, and it may be that you're only going to offer 2 or 3 meal options and half a dozen beverage options when you start, because you don't want to invest the extra money and say having 20 beverage options and 10 different food items that they could order, right? So you start small by saying, okay, it's first year with the food truck. Here's my signature meal choices. I'm only going to offer these 2 or 3 meal choices, and I'm only going to offer these half dozen drink options for people because it's my first year and I want to keep my costs low. If you're running a food truck and you've got 10 meal options, then you need a lot more ingredients and a lot more space potentially, and you need to be better, really, really good at identifying how much of each ingredient you're going to need, right? So you start small and then you ramp it up as you go.
Chantal,
so yes.
I was going to mention there is a comment or a question in the chat. Did you want me to share it with you?
Yes, please.
So Barbara is asking, how often did you get to work with this strategy, and how did you rate the amount of time that you spent with your kids versus being employed by an organization?
So for me personally, I liked being there in the morning to get them on the bus. And for the 3 years before I became a veteran, my husband put them on the bus because I had to drive an hour and a half away, or an hour, 15 minutes away to work. And then I'd go in really early so I could get back early enough to pick them up from daycare. And then he worked into the night. So how we made it work as 2 working you know, two parents and working, both having work, him with a business and me with the military, is I could start my day really early and consistently be back on time to pick them up from daycare. And he could just keep working until his work was done, which sometimes is 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. So he had morning shift, I had evening shift. When I became a veteran and started my own business, I got morning routine again, which isn't always calm, but it was a lot better knowing that I didn't have to rush off to work. And my husband appreciated being able to sleep in a bit. And I enjoyed that time in the morning, walking them half a kilometer away to their bus stop and chatting with them and finding out about what their day was. And at the end of the day, when I'd go pick them up again, I'd walk half a kilometer to their bus stop and I'd wait for them. And then we'd walk home and they'd tell me about their day. And that time to me was precious. And it worked. And I even signed them up in after school activities. So for the first couple, maybe 3 years, most of my work was done from the time I got home from dropping them off at the bus till when I went to pick them up from the bus. And it worked for me, but it wasn't a very financially beneficial business in the first few years, okay? Because I was limiting when I was working, and for a few other reasons that I'll talk about as we move forward, I wasn't getting the chance to make a lot of money, but that was okay. So you kind of have to do what works for you. And then of course, living in a pandemic has really caused lots of interesting things, because oftentimes parents are finding themselves supervising their children with online learning. By the time this happened, my kids who were still in school were teenagers, and so they can watch themselves do their learning. So it wasn't a big deal for me. So it really comes down to what works for you. And that might not have answered your question, but that's kind of where it is. Going back to mitigation strategies, if you've got a pension or savings or investments, then you can draw from those investments or draw from the savings to help you with the lean startup. And in my case, the lean startup was buying my first laptop, which has been retired since, buying my first laptop and incorporating my business. Incorporation is a whole other story. Please read about incorporation before you just choose to do it, because if you're starting a one-person business, you don't really need to incorporate, especially if you're doing something that's you're not going to get sued for doing. But there's things to think about. In our cases, because my husband had his own company, he was able to give a little bit of advice, but his company is in the construction field, so it's very different from what I was doing as training and speaking. So he gave me some advice, and one was, incorporate provincially so that you have less trouble doing taxes. And our accountant agreed. He said, please, Chantal, incorporate provincially unless you're planning on starting a business that spans all of Canada. So I did. So you can get moral support, you can get advice from family and members. As my business has grown, my children are now teenagers and a young adult, and they do more stuff around the house to help out, and I can spend more time on my business, right? So there's different ways that you can get support. What I do recommend as the best financial mitigation strategy you can do is go get a line of credit for your business before you start your business full time. So you can go and interview banks and learn all about all the different banks in your community and who you'd like to work with. I'm not going to recommend banks because that's not my job here, but you can interview banks, figure out who's got the best rates. There's different banks who offer different services. I went with a bank other than the one where I have my personal banking because I wanted everything completely separate. I didn't want anything from my business touching my family's finances unless it was transfers to me and my family, okay? But please, if you've got a career and you go and say you're starting to think of business, then you can get a business line of credit. And I learned about business line of credits in a completely unexpected way. And I'm not saying this is going to happen to you, but I will say that women have a tendency to go to their families and friends first. Go to the bank first, okay? Because you can have a negative impact if you borrow funds from family and friends and then your business doesn't go the way it's expected, or they want money back before you're ready to pay back. So go ask. There's no harm in asking for funds from a bank. Worst case, they say no and you go to the next bank, okay? But ask, because you never know if they're going to say yes. And the reason I chose the business bank that I did is because I ended up seeing the manager because they were between small business reps that day. And she heard my business idea. And remember, my business idea was I was going to speak, I was going to train, and I'd write if I had to help people learn how to thrive. Okay, that was basically it. And she said, I love your business idea. You're passionate, you're interested. Let me give you a line of credit and a credit card, and here's the total dollar amount I'm willing to give you. Just tell us the split of how you'd like them. So I thought, she believes in my business. So I'm going with this bank, and I've been with them ever since. And they keep increasing my limits. Sometimes I have to say no, because enough is enough. But it's go to the banks. Worst case, they say no. Best case, they say yes, and you don't have to go into your personal monies in order to start your business. Another sip of tea. Oh, and thank you, Carrie, for sharing that book, this Lean Startup book. Well, yes. So set up your mitigation strategies while you're still employed, because you have more time to think about that. And I share this. I want to share a story. There's a smart, accomplished woman that I coach now that invested tens of thousands of dollars into her dream business over the last decade. And she's still not making the profits that she wanted to make. We've just started working together, and she's excited again. And we're talking about different plans, what she can do to get to where she wants to be. But really think about it before investing those tens of thousands of dollars. I seriously recommend doing the Lean Startup, okay? You don't have to look like you're a big successful company in a big successful high-rise in the middle of Toronto, when really you're a solopreneur working out of your condo. It's okay to be authentic and come across as the solopreneur working out of your condo, and not try to pretend to be somebody you're not, because it keeps your costs down and it makes it a lot easier to get to the point where you're making decent returns. Okay, ideal clients. Now, this is huge. This is huge. I had no idea who my ideal clients were when I started my business in 2012. I had friends and family who said, hey, you're a great mentor, you're a great coach, you should be coaching people. But I had this misconception in my head that coaches were people who had to be available 24/7, and I wanted to spend time with my kids, and I didn't want to be as available as people would need me to be in my misconception about what a coach was. So I refused and I resisted, and I went after speaking engagements, and it took a little bit of time to figure out what people wanted to hear me speak about, because I thought, I could speak about this. And they're like, no, we want you to speak about that. So it took me some time. It took 3 years before I found my consistent, regular client that I've been working with ever since. Well, we met 2 years after I started my company. I've been working with them since 2015. And I deliver sessions on their behalf consistently to mainstream employers to help them understand Indigenous inclusion so that we can have more ideal workplaces, which is fantastic. But it took me a long time to figure out who my ideal clients were. And I haven't put anything on the slide yet, because this is what my business model looked like with ideal clients when I started. I had no clue. If you know who your ideal clients are, who you're serving, what people you'd like to work with, or what kind of people you'd like to work with, and where your clients are in real life and online, where you're going to connect with them. If you know what problems you're going to solve for them, and if you know if they're going to pay you, then you're starting to get that idea of who your ideal clients are. And it wasn't until I took a course with Dion Baker from Shop Boss Secrets in the end of 2019, early 2020, that I really started to get an idea of who my ideal clients were, because she has a whole process for Ideal Customer Bootcamp, fabulous course. And she takes you through this process who you learn who your ideal clients were. And I got to a point where it's like, great, I know what type of person I like to serve. And when you know who you'd like to serve, you know what sort of service you're offering them, then you can write your marketing, right? Then you can write your webpage content. Then you can write descriptions of your talks or your coaching or whatever it is, or descriptions of the fabulous products or the fabulous food that you're selling, right? So knowing who you're serving. So we have a food truck, a person, and sorry, I'm not good with names. So I wrote down your name, but it's, yeah, my notes are not very easy to read. So if you're serving those 3 dishes that you want to serve in your food truck, and you know what type of person loves that kind of food, then it's a lot easier to write the marketing copy to get people to come to your food truck, to get to follow you on social media, to know where your food truck's going to be so they could come get your food, right? If you know what kind of coaching clients you want to work with and what their problems are that you're solving, then you can better write your copy and you can attract people, and you can, and the more niched you are about knowing who your ideal clients are, the easier it is to do everything in your business, right? In 2017 and 2018, I started coaching people because people insisted on paying me. And at first it was like, this is really tough. They're paying me and it's so easy to coach them and they're having great results, but it feels too easy to be paid for it. It's okay to get paid for what's easy for you to do and what's difficult for others to do. Like my virtual assistants, they're fabulous at what they do. If they do things that I find completely irritating, like editing my videos, right? Like they do a fabulous job and I get saved the headache, right? So it took me a while to learn that I could coach people and they could pay me for that, and I could help them achieve their goals of finding their ideal job or creating their ideal job as entrepreneurs, right? So the more you know about who your ideal clients are, the better off you'll be for doing everything else in your business. All right, I'm going to take another sip of tea. Oh, an example of knowing who your clients are. I put on an online group course last summer, and I thought my ideal clients were going to be women veterans like me who are looking for their ideal careers. I wrote all my marketing copy with those women in mind. All the people that signed up for my course were human resources professionals who worked in Ontario, who knew me from the work I do with the Human Resources Professional Association. Not one single veteran. So now I've realized that when I'm doing ideal career coaching, maybe I'm looking to write my marketing copy to career professionals like human resources professionals, right? So it takes time and effort, and there's iterations, and you figure it out as you go. Oops, I went backwards there. Okay, so the next thing, we're getting there. We're on the V for Strive, value proposition. And this is important, right? You figured out who you want to work with. How is what you offer different? If you're going to coach them, what is your unique proposition? What do you offer that is different from the other coaches out there? And what are you going to charge, for your food? Or what are you going to charge for the construction services? Or what are you going to charge for your coaching services? And why would people want to pay you, right? You have to be able to explain to them why you're good at and why you should be the coach that they hire, for example. And you're going to get asked to do stuff for free or pro bono. And that's okay. Doing stuff for free is okay. But you have to decide what you're willing to do for free and how much of are you willing to give away. So it's good to give away some tips and tricks and do some free content that's available to attract clients so they can get an idea who you are before they decide to work with you. That's all good. But if you're giving away all of your services, you don't have a business, you have a social enterprise, right? So, and the social enterprise could be a business, but if you're giving everything away and you're not getting any money in from funding from the government or funding from grants or people paying for your social enterprise services, then really you're just giving. And giving is good. Women love to give and help, and that's great. But it's okay to be paid to do what you love, all right? So figure out what's going to be for free and what people are going to pay you for and why they want to pay you. Like, what's different? And a key tip here, and I'm not going to go into a bunch of detail about cash flow, but cash flow is the queen of the business. You need to know how much money is coming in and how much money is going out, because you're going to have business expenses. If you buy a laptop, it's going to cost you money. If you have a cell phone for your business, it's going to cost money. If you buy a vehicle for your business, it's going to cost money. If you buy a food truck, it's going to cost money. You know, everything costs money, which is okay, right? Because you're helping keep the economy going. But if all you're doing is spending and you don't have enough income coming in to cover your basic expenses, or just enough to cover your basic expenses, what you have is a hobby that pays for itself, okay? So a hobby that pays for itself, you can say you're in business, but really you're just paying for your hobby of whatever it is. And the first probably 2.5, 3 years of what I was doing my business, I basically had a hobby business. I was keeping myself busy while my kids were in school. When you start getting paid what you're worth, and you start earning income, and you start being able to pay yourself either a wage or with the owner draw, however you want it, or with other ways. There's all kinds of ways to pay yourself. Talk to an accountant or bookkeeper and find out the best way. But you need to have that money coming in to pay for all your expenses. And it's really important. Cash flow is queen of business. You need to understand that. So part of your value proposition is, if these are all my projected expenses, how much money do I need to bring in to achieve my goals with this business? Okay, I'm going to take another sip of tea and see if there's any questions.
I know that one of the biggest questions a lot of women have is, well, how do I price my services? And just on that note, that's an entire workshop on its own. And I will drop in the Zoom chat a link to a workshop we did on that with Cheryl Himber. But Chantal, you can certainly speak to it if you like. But I know it's a massive subject. Just as you were talking about this, I could see people like, I don't know, what should I charge? Where do I start? And it's a big challenge for sure.
Yeah, and Cheryl Himber, great person. She knows her stuff. She helps people go from $250,000 a year in sales to millions of dollars in sales. So she really knows her stuff. I recommend listening to anything that she's got out there, whether it's We Can or any of our other services that she offers. Great coach. There's knowing how to price yourself is the most difficult thing you could ever do. And it's interesting. You could even, if you're doing coaching, you could have a sliding scale. You could have, depending on the purpose of your business, you may choose to offer essentially the same services at different rates for different people. And because this is recorded, I won't tell you what I call my most expensive rate, but it's the, we'll call it the frustration factor. It's not the word I use. I use a phrase, but there's a frustration factor that I add to my quotes. If I see that a client who wants coaching or wants me to do some training for them, if I feel that they're going to be really frustrating to work with, then I charge them a premium in the quote, because I figure if they're going to be frustrating to work with, I should be compensated. So if they choose not to accept my quote, I go, don't have to work with them, and I go work with somebody else. If they choose to accept the quote, then I just remind myself as doing the work that I'm being paid well to do this. It's all good, right? So there's that factor. For an example, for somebody who started with lean startup and figured out how to price her products and has done a fabulous job, and I can't take any credit for it. I'm like fangirl for this young woman. And of course, I can't remember her name because I'm horrible with names. But if you look up XXL Scrunchie Company, it's a young woman who started a company out of her apartment or her parents' basement in Belleville, and she sells literally extra large scrunchies for your hair. all the colors of the rainbow. She started in her parents' basement or her apartment, I can't remember exactly, in the pandemic. And she's now in her second warehouse because she had to move out of wherever she started to a warehouse because the business just grew so phenomenally fast. And then she had to move to a bigger warehouse because it's just growing. And she keeps employing friends and family. I think she's got a staff of 6 or 7 people now. There's really great presence on Instagram. I love following her because it's always upbeat. And she doesn't spend a lot of time talking about herself. She talks about her business and her customers, and she talks about her teammates, the people that she hired to help her. Just fabulous. So I'm not trying to discourage you as we go through all this. There are success stories, people who start small, that lean startup, basic offering, and then grow. And she doesn't give away her scrunchies. She charges you a fair chunk of money for them, but people love them and they keep buying them. So she's found her ideal client. She writes to them, and they've helped her grow her business phenomenally. So she figured out her value proposition. I love working with Carrie because, oh, there, I did it again. She always adds nice bits of information into the chat as we go. Okay, so expectations. It's really important to manage your expectations as you go into starting your own business or go from full-time career woman to full-time entrepreneur. And there's a whole host of things that people can expect. I found this really great article by a student from Telfer, who's just published. When I Googled this, like, why do people become entrepreneurs? And I'd already started my list, and her 4 things helped me confirm what I wanted to put on this slide. A lot of people, when they decide to become entrepreneurs, want a flexible schedule, more time with the kids, more time to go for walks with the dog, right? They want more flexible. They want to be able to wake up when they want to wake up and work when they want to work. A lot of people want independence. They don't want to work for somebody else who's setting their work goals and telling them what they need to do and when they need to do it. They just want some independence. A lot of people, women in particular, want more meaningful work. You know, they've slogged away at a career and done well at a career for many years, but they don't find any meaning in the work. So they want to go do something. And that's how come a lot of women start social enterprises, because they want to give back to the community, but they want to also earn a living while they're doing it. So they'll start a social enterprise. And then there's income expectations. People think, wow, I can make more money as an entrepreneur. And you can, but you have to put the work in. Yeah. And a lot of people who become entrepreneurs say that they work harder as an entrepreneur than they did when they worked for somebody else. Mm. And that in part can be because you know that you're getting the benefits, you're reaping the benefits yourself. So it just means that if you're the type of person to worry, when you were working for somebody else, you might be worried about making a deadline. When you're working for yourself, if you're the type of person who worries, you're going to be worried about, are my clients going to pay their invoices on time? If you're doing service work, are my stock items going to arrive in time so that I can meet my client orders? You know, like there's lots of things to take to worry about. So if you're the type of person who worries a lot, then be cautious about becoming an entrepreneur, okay? Because you're going to make yourself unhealthy, because there's all kinds of things that can go wrong, right? So it's really important to know what your expectations are, and to think about all the other parts of the word strive while you're thinking about your expectations. Now, how can you set things up, set the conditions for success so that you're more likely to achieve your goals, okay? Mm-hmm. It's also good to set milestones and goals. And some of those milestones might be off ramps. And again, I'm not trying to discourage you from becoming an entrepreneur. I'm just trying to be realistic here. You may give yourself, you have this nest egg put away that will cover expenses for 3 years, basic expenses. You know some realistic goals of how much income you can expect within the first 6 months or first year or over the 3 years. And you can set milestones. And if I haven't made this much by this time, or if I haven't got a recurring customer base of this many people by this time, then I'm going to just look for other opportunities, right? It's okay to have off ramps. And some people say you need to go 100% in, but you're also going to spend a lot more time worrying if you're 100% in and you don't have some off ramps. So you don't have to set off ramps. It could give you more peace of mind if you do. And the big tip here is set realistic goals when you're doing your startup, because it's a lot better to set realistic goals and then exceed them and be joyous because you've sold way more, like the young woman who's got XXL scrunchies, right? To exceed your expectations is fabulous and it's exciting, and you can share the information and be excited and have more business come out of your excitement and that. But if you set really outlandish and outrageously huge goals and you don't meet them, then you're going to be a lot more disappointed and potentially financially in the hole than if you set realistic goals. So it's good to have long-term dreams, but don't expect to start a business and be making $250,000 in sales within 3 weeks, right? Like, you have to be realistic. Well, you don't have to be realistic. You can go out and set those crazy goals and maybe even meet them. But chances are it's going to take longer than you expected to reach your goals. Unless you've really, really niched down who your ideal clients are, what your value proposition is, and they jump in and buy your stuff, okay? So, or buy your services. So that's most of the Strive model. We'll wrap it up in the next slide, but I'm going to have a sip of tea waiting for questions. Okay, so what we've covered over the last 40 some minutes is the Strive model, okay? Again, skills and knowledge, time, risk and mitigation, ideal clients, value proposition, and expectations. And thank you for the comment. So this is the model. There's lots of examples that can be used. Lots of time here for questions. If you have questions, throw them in the chat. If you don't want to go on screen, feel free to ask questions live if you want to ask questions live.
Chantal, if it's easier, I can just stop the recording once you're at the end of the presentation, and we can just make sure the Q&A is confidential.
Yeah, we could do that too. Okay, so what we'll do then, because there doesn't appear to be any questions at this point, is we'll carry on. What I'm going to cover next, and I'm going to have another sip of tea because there's a lot of explaining on the next slide. I drink throat tea. It's a traditional medicines tea that helps keep my throat in good shape to speak. All right, what I'm going to cover now is the Ikigai model. It's a Japanese model. I've got it. I found a beautiful image in Canva, which I adjusted to cover this model. It's 4 circles in a Venn diagram. So what you have is there's a dark blue background, and then there's 4 circles of blue. In the middle, it says Ikigai. The top circle says what you love. The circle to the right says what the world needs. The circle at the bottom says what you can be paid for. The circle to the left says what you're good at. And when you're doing what you love and what the world needs, then you're on a mission. So the word mission is between those two where they overlap. When you're doing what the world needs and that you can be paid for, you've got a vocation. When you're doing what you can be paid for and what you're good at, you're in a profession. And when you're doing what you're good at and what you love, you've got a passion project. Now, your ideal job or your ideal career is when you take all those 4 circles and each one of them is encompassed in what you're doing day to day, and you've reached Ikigai. So the 28 years I was in the military, I was doing what I loved because I loved being in charge and I was an officer. I was doing arguably what the military needed, not necessarily the world, but what the Canadian Armed Forces needed. I was getting paid very well for it, and I was good at it. So the 28 years that I was in the military, I was living this even before I knew this model existed. When I started my business, the first beginning of when I started my business, I was kind of doing what I loved, because I had a lot of people reach out and say, oh, you do human resources consulting. Would you write policies for us? And I'd say, no, thank you. Let me refer you to my colleague over here who does wonderful resources, writes wonderful policies and other resources that you might need for, things that have to do with policies and procedures. Like just that kind of writing just makes me cringe. I've since discovered you can write blogs, and that's a lot more fun. Okay, so when I started my business, I was doing this kinds of stuff I loved, because I said no thank you to the stuff I wasn't interested in. And I was doing stuff that I was good at, okay? And I was sometimes being paid for it when I first started. So I was more over on the left side of the screen. Over the last few years, now I've figured out what the world needs from me, which is helping people find their ideal career or their ideal entrepreneurial opportunity. So either having career coaching or business coaching, and I'm getting paid for it, and I'm having a blast. Okay, so now I'm getting closer into living that inner model again, and doing the things I love to do, that I'm being paid for, that I'm good at, and that somebody in the world needs, right? So in your dream world, that's what your goal is. So as you're going through the Strive model and you're figuring out, okay, what are the risks? Think about the risks of what happens if you're doing something you despise doing. It's not good for your mental health, and it'll probably affect your physical health if you're doing something you don't like doing. So really, this is what you're striving towards, okay? You're striving towards finding your bliss and doing that every day, and accepting compensation for doing what you love to do and what's easy for you. That's the best of worlds, right? The woman I talked about earlier, who a virtual assistant, her name's Ann Harvey. She has enough clients now. She's not taking any more, but man, assistant time, she does so many great things for me, right? And her other clients, because for her, it's easy to organize us. It's easy to do our filing. It's easy to do our bookkeeping. It's easy to figure out from the list of supplies that I give her what to order from the local supplier. She went through the supply book and found the stuff that I needed and gave me options, and then put the order in for me. All I had to do was show up and buy it. I'd had my list of things I needed to buy for office supplies on my desk for 3 months before I said, Anne, can I hire you now and have you figure this out? She had the list to me within 3 days, right? Like seriously, when you're in that zone, you feel it. So yes. I noticed in the chat, there's accepting compensation is one of the biggest obstacles. That's why I keep repeating it in every session that I do, that it's okay to get paid to do what you're good at and what you love and what people want to pay you to do, right? People almost literally, it was more figuratively, knocked me over the head with a 2x4 to say, Chantal, we want to pay you. The first career coaching client I took, the person who hired me said, I want to pay you to do this. And I said, yeah, but I do that for my mentees for free all the time. And they said, yes, but Chantal, you're not mentoring this person. I said, yeah, but I don't know what to charge you. And the person said, Chantal, for this project we were going to work on, we were going to pay you so many dollars an hour for services. So for this career coaching, we're going to pay you so many dollars an hour for this service. And within 6 months, the person had found their dream job, right? So it worked, but it felt weird getting paid to do something I loved. But the people who paid were thrilled. The person found their dream job and they were happy. The first business coaching client was somebody I did pro bono work with, reached out and said, Chantal, we're looking for an HR consultant to help a local business. I said, oh, great. You could talk to, this person, this person, and this person. And they're like, Chantal, we're trying to send clients your way. So I talked to the potential client. We worked together for 2.5 years, right? So, it's okay to get paid to do stuff that you're good at, and it's easy for you, right? It's just hard. Okay, and sorry, the person who said that about the whole idea of getting paid said that they might need the 2x4 method as well, and that made me chuckle. All right, So I do not pretend to be an expert in this model, but the first time I saw this model, I knew this is what I had while I was serving in the military. And I'm happy to say that I'm getting close to it again now.
Chantal, there's a question about, did you find it difficult to negotiate your rates?
Okay, so my first business coaching client, I talked to them and I said, all right, I'll be honest, you're my very first business coaching client that I'm being paid to help. And I said, I don't know what to charge you. And they said to me, we pay this amount to our employment lawyer for our hourly rate. The services you're offering seem comparable, so we're willing to pay you that much. And I said, I'm not sure I'm comfortable charging you that much. Let me think about it and get back to you. And they said, okay. So I came back at a slightly lower amount and I explained it to them this way. I said, I appreciate that you're willing to pay me that amount, but you're my very first business coaching client. So I only want to charge you this amount. And they said, sure, if you want to charge us less, we'll pay you less. So, and like I said, I worked with them for 2 years. They reached a point where they needed a different kind of business coaching. So I handed them off to a colleague who did that kind of business coaching. And they're very pleased working with that new coach now. So the negotiation thing can be funny. It's now I know where I offer coaching from free to you, but somebody else pays me, to $400 an hour, depending on what kind of coaching it is, right? So, and I'm not saying the $400 an hour to scare you. Remember I said there's those people that, we call them frustrating, right? They're going to pay me for that frustration factor. So there's different rates. And did I find it difficult? Yes. It took me 5 years to figure out what I could charge, and then it keeps going up. So as you get more business, then you can start charging more. One of the coaching clients that I worked with was getting paid what would be a reasonable hourly wage for the service they were providing if they were an employee, but they weren't an employee, they were outsourced. And the company they did the majority of their work for kept demanding more and more at the same hourly rate. And my client was really frustrated and said, I don't like the work. They keep asking me to do things I don't like to do. I don't want to work for them anymore, but I don't know how to get rid of them. I said, hey, we're about to come to a new year. Isn't it time that your rates go up? And she said, what do you mean, Chantal? I said, well, that's a good rate if you were an hourly employee and you got benefits and all that stuff. But you're not an hourly employee. You're a consultant. You're an independent consultant, an independent contractor. I said, double your rates. Tell them that you now, effective 1 January, you start charging double what you're charging them now. And she said, but I said, either they like it and they keep paying you, or they say, ooh, we can't afford you anymore, in which case they fired you and you didn't fire them, so you don't have to worry about bad feelings. And she did that, and they said it was too costly. And now she's got a bunch of other clients that she charges the higher rate to, right? Like there was other people who wanted to pay her the higher rate, but she was stuck doing the work she didn't like for that lower rate client. So yeah, you can always up your fees if you're unhappy somewhere.
And Chantal, I'll just echo that. I've heard that similar women, especially starting out in service business, not knowing what to charge. A question would be, what would you be charged in an organization? So like a good rate of pay, and then double that, and it's exactly what Chantal suggested. And that's because you are not an employee and you have to cover your own overhead expenses, et cetera. So that's a great place to start if you're looking for a ballpark figure.
Yeah, thank you. I love that. It's nice to know that you've seen it too. That's a good place to start. Okay, excuse me. All right, I'm moving on to some free resources and things that you can know about. I love everything the We Can Project does. So look at their videos on their YouTube channel, look at further webinars. There's all kinds of great things you can learn for free. as you're doing your recce, the Weekend Project, great resource. In Ontario, there's a couple of organizations, and one is PARO. It's PARO Center for Women's Enterprise, and the link's there. I'm a business growth advisor with PARO, and one of the things I chuckle about to myself is every time new people come to seek business coaching from me in Ontario, and if they happen to be women or non-binary, then I say, go to PARO, join PARO, and then you get my services free because PARO pays me. And it's, you know, it's nice. Cash flow, PARO comes in every month. I give them my invoice. They pay like on the button all the time. It's fabulous. And I get to do something I love, which is help women and non-binary people start or grow their businesses. So that's fabulous. There's small business enterprise centers across Ontario, and there's a similar organization across every community across lands we call Canada that can have people that can help you find ways to start and grow your business. Many of them offer webinars, and as does PARO, they offer webinars similar to what Weekend offers. And most small business enterprise centers have business coaches that are free to you because they're government employees who've been in entrepreneurs before, so they know what they're talking about. Across Canada, there's the Native Women Association of Canada Be the Drum program, which I love because, you know, Métis, fabulous program that offers webinars and some entrepreneurial navigational help from coaches. The Business Development Bank of Canada, so BDC, all kinds of free resources, including coaching. If you're thinking exporting or you're thinking global domination of, you know, hair scrunchies or food trucks or something, talk to BDC. Not only do they provide funding, they have coaches that are free to you because the government pays them, or not the government, the bank pays them. So, you know, like free resources. And there's a couple of resources that I offer free. It's basically the same thing. My pro bono stuff that I talk about for free all the time is networking. I call it identifying and connecting with friendly forces because that's who you're trying to connect with. You're helping each other achieve your goals. You can get a copy of my little ebook from the first link, and there's a free mini course. It's about, take you 30 minutes to go through it on my online course platform. So those are some free resources. Excuse me. Some recommended reading here, and I sought topics from a bunch of different things. 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens. It's written by the son of Dr. Stephen Covey, who wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I love the book for teens because it's easier to read, and it has fun cartoons and things in it, and it's just a lot faster to read. But it gives you all the same key knowledge and how to develop highly effective habits. I love the book Brag, The Art of Tooting Your Own Horn Without Blowing It by Peggy Klaus. Great book, lots of good examples and how you can tell people that you're good at what you do without coming across as being pompous. Driven to Succeed from Poverty to Podium by Kendall Netmaker. He's a great guy. He went from literally poverty to, you know, being an internationally renowned speaker. So I haven't read his book yet, but it's on my list of books to pick up. Everything is Figureoutable by Marie Forleo. She did all the things she loved, and everybody told her she had a bad business model because you couldn't do everything you loved and make a living out of it. This woman knows how to make money and do things that she loves to do while helping people, right? So great role model. I loved the book Good Morning Beautiful Business. I had the honor of listening to Judy Wicks speak in person in 2012. Just after I started my business, I've got an autographed copy of her book, and it was inspirational for building a business that I love. Rules of the Red Rubber Ball by Kevin Carroll. That's the way he writes his name. Talks about following your dream, and it's really light reading. It'll take you maybe half an hour to read, take you a lot longer to ponder the lessons in it. And then Unselling by Scott Stratton and Allison Kramer. Really cool book because it talks about not doing the traditional sales funnel, but actually speaking to people's hearts to sell your products and services. So that's some recommended reading. I always love to give homework because when you learn something new, if you don't put it into practice right away, then you're less likely to retain the knowledge. So this is optional homework. If you're at the stage where you're thinking, I'm pretty sure I want to be an entrepreneur at some stage, then I recommend that you do this homework, but it's up to you whether you do it or not. And I recommend that you spend time, and I call it investing the time. That's one of the best lessons I learned by a business coach shortly after I started my business, was stop thinking about spending and start thinking about investing. If you invest the time to explore and record your thoughts for each aspect of the Strive model as it applies to you, then you'll reap the benefits later, okay? And if this is something you're really considering, then make sure you set as many conditions for success before you start your business as you can right now while you're employed somewhere else, because many of you are employed somewhere else. And then this is all my contact information. I'm gonna have another sip of tea. And I sort of went through that quickly so we'd have time to do a few more questions after we stop the recording.